Baker was last night, maybe, or this
Maybe just now.
Yeah, that's why she
This
was,
afternoon.
that's why she come running in at the last
Yeah.
minute.
And just
It's still
now.
warm.
Chris, I saw you sitting over there. I thought it was Mr. P. I was like, what is he doing there?
Wow.
Man,
Somebody gonna have a comment on that.
Yeah.
what did he say?
He said, I don't even know comment on
Oh.
that. They're not gonna comment, or maybe that's what it is.
Probably best.
See, it's close. I bet you that he'll do it.
Not yet.
You don't think so?
I've been looking.
Yeah, he's going to. He said he was.
They were closed today, weren't they? Bull.
Kabul didn't have school this day, but this is their off day on the 4-day weeks.
Oh, that's them up there.
I think I didn't understand the out from Mondays to Fridays.
Kabul
I don't
closed.
know if it's for sporting events maybe on Friday.
Oh, maybe so.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Salem closed, Kabul closed.
You'd think. I can see where that was interfere with football.
Yeah, exactly. We're gonna suck it up. We can get through this, right? I know. That's right. That's true though, right? Yeah, it's gonna be rough out there anyway.
We don't have to be a follower,
I don't
maybe.
know why
We
I'm
can lead the
Lead
way.
the
I have to work
charge.
anyway.
Let's lead the charge. Home Ranger, get out there.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
Being 7 o'clock, I'll call the meeting to order. You've got an agenda in front of you. Are there any changes to the agenda?
Just one change, have the addition of a resignation letter. I think each of the board is given a copy of that. Resignation letter from Sarah Forrester. So I present that this evening for the board's consideration as well.
Anything else? Are there any questions over the consent agenda items? If not, I'd receive a motion to approve as presented.
So move.
Adam, and a second.
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. Very good. A little bit slow on the draw there, Collie.
And speaking of which, before we jump into administrative reports, Tony, if I could, just to let everyone know out there that we have joining us via Zoom or Google Meet, we have Coach Colley will be here, and also we have Bobby Cottengim, Dr. Tina Spencer, and Marlena Barker. And Marlena will have a presentation later on. I just want to verify that each of you might just do a real sound check test real quick. Can just say something real quick, make sure we got you.
Here.
All right. Marlena, you there?
Here.
Okay, and Tina?
I'm here. I'm here.
Okay, all right, we're all good then, so.
Very good. Jump on to administrative reports. Marty, you're first in the packet.
Yeah, I'm here, too.
Very good.
Sorry, just had to get a little dig in there. The numbers are before you. I'll keep it pretty quick tonight. I know you've got a big agenda. And really, January, not a whole lot of exciting things going on. We're teaching and we're educating. And really, January is when we start looking towards next year and preparing for 21-22. So we've already got the master schedule in the rough draft phase. So that'll come out later this month. We're looking at testing for the spring, and Coach Wagner's been working with us on that. Of course, basketball is going on, and our basketball teams continue to do really well. The girls are 14-7, and the boys are 14-7. Girls are 16-5. We had Hoop Queen Friday, so managed to get that done, and everything went really well as far as I know. Speech and debate, I put that in there. That's a group that sometimes doesn't get a whole lot of attention, but Miss Jennifer Martin works with that team, and they've done a really nice job of doing virtual tournaments all year. Most of the speech and debate tournaments have gone virtual, and that's a very challenging thing to do. Is if you've watched a high school debate It's pretty impressive to watch those kids compete, and we've had several wins in those tournaments, and a lot of times those are tournaments, it's not like basketball where we go play Kabul and Mountain Grove, and they're playing the big St. Louis and Kansas City debate teams. So they've done really well, and so kudos to them. And then it was Counselors Week last week, and just a shout out to Mrs. Patton. She does a great job for us in the high school, and does a lot of work behind the scenes that probably doesn't get enough credit. So upcoming events, we have in-service coming up on Friday. We have a GAP Day on February 17th, and I told you we're working towards next year. That GAP Day will be spent with kids working on their schedules for next year. So it's already that time, and then March 5th will be the end of the third quarter. So we're rapidly moving through, and hopefully we will have a fourth quarter and get all of those fun spring activities that we missed last year.
Looks like you must have got about 19 kids back
We got a bunch back.
from
Yeah.
distance learning. Good.
Yeah.
One question. I'm seeing a difference in our seniors number. Kind of not adding up, and we
Okay.
got that many back, but our numbers really didn't change below for 9 through 12, and we're down 5 seniors from the start. Is there a reason for that, or?
Well, we always have a few seniors that change districts. We've had some come in, some leave.
Something like that.
Some of our virtual students, we actually had a couple of seniors go on virtual this semester. And then some of them that were on virtual stayed on virtual. They were actually being successful with it, so they were able to stay on. The numbers have been in flux all year, and that's, we've had now, the last month has been pretty good, and Chris knows all about that, but between, Chris, probably November through middle of January, we had a steady flow of, I want to do distance learning, I want to come back, and until they fail distance learning, we give them that opportunity, but at this point, we're really not offering that to students anymore. If you're on it and you're doing well, that's great, but most of those other students have come back.
Marty, I haven't heard anything on the alternative school in quite a while. What kind of numbers do we have there right now?
We have 6 right now, and they're doing really well. Mrs. Hutzel's taking them through. They switched to Edmonton as well, when we switched over to Edmonton for the distance learners. Since we were already purchasing that program, A+ is what we did have, and so we let that go and we switched them over to Edmonton. And for the most part, they're doing well.
Any questions for Marty? Thank you. Yep. Tina, are you here?
I am. I can't see myself on my computer. I can't get my settings set right, so I hope you're not looking at my elbow or something like that, but,
We see you.
so, I'm sorry, what?
We see you just fine.
Okay, that might not be a good thing, but I don't know, so it doesn't matter. So you have my numbers in front of you. Our attendance is holding fairly steady, and we were actually up a little bit in January, which was a good thing. I wish we could get back up around that 94 mark, but we're in the high 93s, so we're in pretty good shape there. Our distance learning numbers didn't really change this month. The students who remained on distance learning from first semester are holding steady, and they're the ones who are doing pretty well. We got all but one of our students who were not successful with that back at semester, and then we had one who did opt for the homeschool option. We're currently also using, since we have access to Edmentum and Acellus, we're using that to make up some classes from our first semester. Many of our distance learners came back either late in the semester or didn't come back until second semester, and several of them failed all 4 core classes. And then we also had some students who were seated students on campus, as we do every year, and we have always struggled with, what do we do with those students? We don't have credit recovery like high school does, so this year we're addressing that using Edmentum and Acellus and seeing some success there. The students go to the library during their elective classes, and Ms. Holt oversees that, and they're making up the classes that they didn't successfully pass first semester, and it's kind of making them take their second semester classes a little more seriously, because we didn't really see a lot of students who struggled with the material as much as we did just weren't doing their work. So we're piloting that this year, and we're just going to kind of see how that goes. We're always looking for a better way to do things. We're still continuing, our Character Strong program is going strong, and I appreciate our teachers, they do a good job with that. That's Mrs. Cottengim oversees that. Our student for the month in January was Karis Cochran, and we always appreciate Terry Newton at Shelter Insurance. He gives them a very nice gift card every month. The student who wins the drawing, we put all of their names in a hat, and we pull out one of the ones that got a bear paw, which is the recognition for going over and above with behavior. We're scheduled, if we are at school tomorrow, to register or start the registration process for our 8th graders going into 9th graders. Mrs. Patton is scheduled to come into our 8th grade social studies classes. Last week I sent home the 9th grade elective course descriptions. Of course, their core classes are already chosen for them, but we sent home 9th grade course descriptions to parents for them to talk to their students about them, and then they'll start the scheduling process with Mrs. Patton tomorrow and choosing electives for their 9th grade year. And that's always exciting for us, because those 8th graders, they can start seeing kind of an end in sight and start getting ready to go to the high school. We did get some Chromebooks in this week, or over the last 2 weeks actually. Mrs. Mayberry and Mrs. Lewis, the 5th grade math and science teachers, are participating in the eMints grant this year, and as a result of their work, which they've had to do a lot of reading and a lot of meeting, they've done some Zoom meetings, they've done some seated meetings, a lot of collaboration. We're one of 3 schools participating in our area, and we received 75 Chromebooks, which was many more than we thought we were going to through that grant, and 3 Chromebook carts, so that's 3 classroom carts. So our 5th grade is now 1-to-1. We have 5 Chromebook carts in our 5th grade, so each of our core area classrooms has them, and then we have enough for our special ed classroom to also have enough for its students to work through. And that's a 100% funded grant. We pay for it, but then we're 100% reimbursed, both for the supplies and for the professional development and subs and things like that. So that was a really beneficial program to participate in this year, and the reason we got to do that was because of Mr. Hall's persistence. I'm sure he nagged at someone until we were accepted into that. So we also did peer coaching training with all of our middle school teachers. I went into their PLCs and did the preliminary training to introduce that in January. On Friday's PD day, we're going to set some goals and pick our partners, and we're going to get started on that and get a couple of peer coaching meetings in between now and the end of the school year. That's an MMD initiative that is just part of the high school has been doing it for a while, and we're doing it building-wide, starting this month, I guess. I did include a discipline report that Mr. A had asked for last month, and I apologize because it was very hard to kind of pull that together for a couple of reasons. Number one, we did some major restructuring with our discipline code. We sat down with Mr. Schmidt and Dr. Spence, Mrs. Cottengim and I did last spring, and we tried to make our code match up to their code. Of course, our discipline consequences aren't always as rigorous as theirs are. We try to provide a safe environment for our students to make their mistakes, and of course there have to be consequences for that, but they're in middle school and they don't always have the decision-making processes that some of the high school students have. So, but our actual code lines up with the high school code as far as the types of infractions and we sat down and we looked at the consequences, and we took some of them down a little bit, but for the most part, we line up with high school quite nicely now, and we didn't do that last year. We also, of course, have a new assistant principal. So the assistant principal in our building is the one who codes the disciplinary referrals, and her middle name is consistency, and that's what she strives for, is to be consistent across the board with the handbook and the consequences that students receive. So I think that as we go through the next 2 or 3 years, we have our Character Strong program, the consistency in having the same person coding from one year to the next will, it was hard, I didn't feel like we were comparing apples to apples in our report this year. I did list on the report, as you can see, I listed some of our major infractions that we deal with on a regular basis. And as you can see, some of them have gone up and some of them have gone down, and I don't really have a good explanation for why that is. I'm hoping as we go through second semester this year and compare that to first semester, and as we look at next year compared to this year, we'll be able to kind of see some patterns emerge. But some of the things that we deal with regularly, cell phones have become a huge issue in our building, as far as students wanting to use them when they're not supposed to. I've reached out to I'm in the SCA Middle School Principals group, and I've reached out to that group and said, tell me what's working for you, and their response is, well, nothing really, you tell us if you find something that works, because just something that we're all struggling with. More and more of our middle school students have cell phones. They, the reason that their age group, we don't always make good decisions, so we're working on that. Our bus misconduct went way down, and I don't have a good explanation for that. It does seem like we're having fewer incidents on the bus this year. I don't know if that's due to better driver training, or I don't know why, but I think that that's been a better thing. You can look at the numbers. So like I said, some of them have gone up, some of them have gone down. We're maintaining about the same on some of the major incident codes. We deal a lot with, I'm not going to say a lot, but one of our major incidents is tobacco use and vaping in our building. That's a regular struggle. I don't feel like we're dealing with fighting as much, although it shows that we only went down one incident this year. In the first semester, it seems like we're having fewer, a little bit less drama and a little bit less of the physical altercations. So does anybody have any questions on that?
I got a question. You said tobacco use and vaping. What does that fall under? Is that not on the list here?
I did not, I didn't put that on the list because last year we were showing that we only, and I think I meant to actually, last year we were showing we only had one tobacco incident in the first semester, but then when we looked back and investigated that, because I knew that wasn't the case, some of those for whatever reason got coded under food violations. So we have, I don't know. This year, we have had 4 incidents of tobacco usage, and that includes vaping, and 1 incident of tobacco possession, and that was during first semester. And I know we've already had some during this month. As a matter of fact, we dealt with an incident today of vaping, so.
I'd like to point out one thing, just a shout out to your teachers and to Marty's also. Faculty attendance, both buildings up over 95%. That, we push for our students to be here. I think it's very important our teachers are here also, and that kind of tickled me to see that tonight.
Really good.
So, kudos.
We appreciate that, thank you.
Anybody else? All right, thank you. Bobby, you're next.
All right, you can see that our attendance and enrollment numbers have been remarkably consistent this year, considering the circumstances that surround us. But if you have any questions, feel free to ask about those. Upcoming events, Friday, we are really data-driven in elementary, and we're hopeful to have a data day on Friday. That's where we'll look at our intervention kids and regroup them, look at our weaknesses from our iReady data from the first 2 diagnostic tests, and regroup those intervention kids and get them the services they need. This semester, first semester, we had an online book fair, so it wasn't in person. Obviously, it didn't do very well. We feel that things are a little bit looser this semester, and we're going to do an in-person book fair. Still no parents, no visitors, no volunteers, but the kids are going to get to shop for books that are right there in front of them. So we're looking forward to that. We've scheduled our map testing dates, and Mr. Wagner, I think, will speak to that later on. But mentioning Chromebooks, we got our first allotment of Chromebooks from the CARES funds, and our 3rd and 4th grade. 4th grade was already 1-to-1, but now our 3rd grade will be 1-to-1, so that should make map testing a breeze this year. We usually have to collect Chromebooks from throughout the building to make map testing happen, but that'll be one less thing we have to do. And then we set the date for preschool and kindergarten screening. So for our new students, that'll be coming to us next year. And as Marty said, we celebrated School Counselors Week last week. We feel very blessed to have Erin Brower as our school counselor. She does so many things for our students, so numerous. It would take a while to remember everything she is involved in. At the beginning of the year, she did win the Mr. Bill Award just for her work throughout our building, throughout the district. And I just wanted to highlight one of those things that she is kind of a champion of. It's our Bare Necessity Fund. We started it my 2nd year. We just had a little fundraiser and raised about $1,300 in a week. And since that time, it has sustained itself. And you know, this year with COVID, we've heard about all the needs and student needs. And I just wanted to update you on some of the needs we have met. And I think you have it. Erin wrote up just a little summary, and then on the other page just has some of the things that we have met for students this year with coats, school supplies, hygiene, clothing, socks, and shoes. And so if you have any questions about that, feel free to ask. But if you see Erin, just let her know how much she's appreciated. So.
Any questions for Bobby?
Are all the funds donated by school staff, or how does that work?
We did invite school staff in our building to donate from their paycheck, and I don't know the exact number now, but it was up around 20 when we first started, and they can give whatever amount they want monthly, and so $5, $10, $15. So that has helped, but really churches, Rotary, the individuals, I think you'll see a lunch bill of $120 or so that was paid. That was just an individual that approached us and wanted to donate to the fund to take care of a lunch bill. And really, once the community found out about it, we really haven't had to put any additional funds into that program. Erin, I believe, wrote a grant with Community Foundation of the Ozarks, and you'll see that it's included in our fund balance. She separated it out there. I believe that started out as a $10,000 grant, but we have used it down, and there's about $3,800 left from that.
Any other questions? Thanks, Bobby. Is there anything on the support services?
No, did you want to see if Marlena had a report? Marlena Barber?
Yeah. Marlena, do you have a report, or is your stuff gonna roll over into your, in a little bit?
I think I'll roll over into the special ed presentation.
Okay. Very good.
And I don't necessarily, if I can add just a couple of things, I don't necessarily have anything on the support services summary. I hope you take the opportunity, I have each of the department heads kind of write that up each month and give a monthly synopsis. Oftentimes, you don't hear what the support staff are doing, and they're extremely busy, and so it'll give you an opportunity to kind of read through a lot of what they're working on. And then just on the other side, two things really. One, I want to welcome Scott Foster here to the board and to the board meeting, and eventually to the board. He'll be sworn in at the April board meeting, and so he'll be taking Mr. Graves' place, and then I want to welcome Mac Gum back on the Board of Education again. So thank you both, Mac and Scott. And then on another note, and you receive these certificates, and I know you get them every year, and that's fine. I mean, that is a sign of appreciation, and I don't know if Carly really appreciated it a whole lot, but I will. Is he? He's listening. All right. But I really, truly, next week is Missouri School Board Association Appreciation Week. And I just want to take an opportunity on behalf of just myself, working with the Board of Education. I just appreciate everything that you all do. The amount of time and effort that you put into this. You don't get paid a whole lot. You might get some cookies at the end of the meeting. But other than that, there's no compensation involved. You didn't know that, did you, Scott, before you signed up?
He's like, don't miss the cookies.
You'll get some cookies, and then, but from the bottom of my heart, I really do appreciate your leadership, your devotion to our school system and to our kids and to our staff. And I want to thank you for everything that you do on a monthly basis, on a bi-weekly basis, all the committees that you may serve on, the work that we do with special board meetings, different things that we do. So thank you for serving on the Board of Education. It's not a job that you get a lot of kudos on very often, but I just want to say on behalf of myself, thank you very much for the work that you do for our school district. The other side of that, and I know Dr. Spencer talked about receiving 75 Chromebooks from the grant, from the eMints grant. On top of that, and Mr. Cottingham alluded to it, we just received a week or so back another 350 Chromebooks that came from the CARES money through both Howe County and Texas County. In addition to that, we have another 210 that will be showing up probably about May. And so we'll have anywhere just over 600 new Chromebooks that are being added in 1 year. And all of that, most of that, 75 came through a grant, the other 560 came because we have county CARES money, And that's a good thing and a bad thing. It's a good thing because it's creating one-on-one accessibility to all of our kids. The bad thing is 5 years from now, they're all going to be ready to be replaced.
At the same time.
So at the same time. So I'm working with Andrew on developing a plan to do that. Kind of set aside about $14,000 out of his budget. I'll match it every year, and we'll do that every year for 5 years. So hopefully when that time comes, we'll have the money budgeted to replace those Chromebooks. So that's good news, bad news, but it is very, very good for our kids. And then the last item, I did receive notification last week from DESE of our allocation for the new ESSER 2 money. And if you recall, the first round of ESSER money came last spring, just about the time that the COVID broke out and schools were closing, and we used those dollars to backfill the salaries. And at that time, I think that was like $350,000, $400,000. Our allocation for the ESSER 2 money is $1.5 million. So we will have a little over $1.5 million that I need to sit down with the Board of Education and work out a plan on what you would like to see done with those dollars. We have until September of 2023 to expend those dollars, so you have time. A few of the ideas I might want to toss around to you, we had talked about replacing the 2-pipe boiler system and a new HVAC system at the middle school. That is an allowable expense under these new ESSER funds. And it's wide open in terms of HVAC, indoor air quality, maintenance upgrades or facility upgrades is another part of it. So we kind of visit with Dr. Spence and Officer Moore and Dr. Spencer about doing some controlled access points to our middle school and our high school that we currently do not have, and which would be another allowable expense of that. So I have some ideas. Before we just start going out and spending dollars, I want to make sure that we're very clear when we have a budget plan specifically for the ESSER 2 dollars. So everyone's clear about whether it's happening now or all the way up to September 23, we have an idea how we're going to spend those dollars. So that's good news. I mean, we just keep getting money, and so Those are good things because we're able to upgrade our facilities and do some things that otherwise we wouldn't be able to do. So I would like to have a work session with the board later this spring to specifically talk about that. And I'm working on getting estimates right now from energy performance companies. We might even be able to take one of our roofs that we had planned to replace this summer and use ESSER dollars for that. So I'm still waiting on guidance for that, which will certainly help because then we can basically backfill our budget. And so there's some things, I have some ideas. We'll have a budget work session later on this spring. We'll come up with kind of a plan on how we're going to spend those moving forward. So, and that's all I have at this point, so.
Very good. We will move on. Marlena, you're up with a special education report.
Okay,
Okay, now my turn?
okay, hold on. Let me get you hooked up here. You want your PowerPoint up right now?
Sure.
All right, let me see if I can figure this out. Let's see, go there. And here. And here. Move that out of the way. Okay, can you see that?
I can.
All right, let me get your going here.
Okay.
All right, you're up. Let me know when you want me to advance it.
Okay, I will. And the first part of the packet, I think that you guys saw, it'll say on the top of it from a distance, if you can see and follow along where I'm at, it will say the Willow Springs Art School District. And this is our special ed district profile. We receive this report every spring. It is a year late, so the items that are being reported on this are from the 1920 school year. Part of this year's reporting as well, last year was the desk review for special education. I know I've touched on that previously, that every 3 years we go through a process where we have to submit certain documents to the State Department for review on compliance. So part of this data comes from that and is only reported every 3 years. Okay, the next slide, please. All right, the first part on, that'll be the second page of this, there'll be several indicators that are on there. It'll have the targets for the state and district that are listed on there. The first thing at the top of that is the early childhood special ed data. There are a couple of indicators on there that are not met, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about why they are not met. When kiddos in our early childhood services are from 3-year-old to kindergarten age. These kiddos, whenever they enter the program, we have to give them a rating based on how they are performing on 3 different areas. They call them early childhood outcomes. Those are listed on that chart. We address things on positive social emotional skills, acquisition and use of knowledge skills, and the use of appropriate behavior to meet needs. So whenever students enter the early childhood program, they're given a rating, and then when they exit the program at kindergarten age, we have an exit rating for those as well. The areas that are met and not met, those are addressed based on whether our kiddos make progress in the early childhood program. I feel like that, first of all, and my group of early childhood, we had a training on this today. I feel like they were rating our kiddos too strictly, first of all, from where they started to where they exited. And then secondly, if you don't rate them at a 5 or being on target for age appropriateness, you automatically don't meet. So we looked at what was required for meet and not meet whenever we make those ratings today and how they need to be looking at reporting those in the future. The second thing that we did to address part of this is in the past, part of our early childhood special ed services were provided in more of a itinerant type of thing where the kids came in maybe just 1 day or 2 days a week, or our early childhood teacher went to the home to provide services. And we restructured that a little bit for this year. We actually shifted gears about mid-first semester, where we have 2 half-day programs now, basically. We have a program that's for our 3 to 4-year-olds, and then that is in the morning, and then the other age group, the 4 to 5-year-olds, is in the afternoon. This allows for kids to be in more often and get a little more consistency on the services that they're receiving versus maybe just 1 or 2 days a week. So we're hoping that we see improved outcomes in the future by making that restructure to so we can target those skills a little more heavily going forward. All right, the next slide. All right, as you go down this list, you will see that most of the other areas are met on that table until we come to, and I didn't put this on a slide, there is a section on there where it says parent survey data, and that is part of our 3-year process on our desk review. We have to send out surveys to all of our special ed parents. Those are digital or paper if they don't have access to the internet. And then that is reported on how many parents return them and that have positive things to say about the school district. I think out of the over 200 plus surveys that were sent out, there were only 17 that were received back for the reporting data. So it wasn't met because of that reason. Nothing that's overly concerning, because I'm not sure that you can really solve getting those back any better unless you have a parent to do them in person. And usually that doesn't happen. This slide addresses the next part of it. Yes.
Hey, just a quick question. I'm looking on that, in the packet, and it says the parent survey data, it says 53.8%. Not met, and the goal was 70%. Again, so that's not a reflection of their attitude as much as it is how many turned in the survey?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Out of the 17, and I'm back in the packet, it breaks it down a little more specifically. There were 17 that were completed, and I think out of those 17, maybe 1 or 2 parents said that they weren't overall satisfied with the input that they felt they had on their kids' educational program for their IEPs. So overall, there was pretty good reports, 15 or so that said that they felt like they had adequate input, and there were a couple that didn't. And so that's the reason why that score is what it is. Okay, the next slide that you see on your screen, that's on, well, I'll go back one, on secondary transition data. That wasn't met either, and a lot of this has to do with the follow-up. Students with IEPs, whenever they graduate from high school, we have to do a reporting follow-up just the same as we do high school. But we have to follow our kiddos, are supposed to, a little bit longer than just the initial follow-up after they graduate in the spring. And what we have to survey our IEP students on is, first of all, did they graduate? And we had a 90% graduation rate where the state average was 74.5, so that's really good. And then dropout rate last spring, we met in that area, there were no dropouts. And then the part that wasn't met was the percentage of youth that were 16 and above with IEPs that had IEP goals for post-secondary transition who went on to some sort of higher education. And according to our survey data, we don't have a lot of kiddos with IEPs who go on and do something other than go into the workforce. And so that's an area that we probably need to focus on to make sure that they're either going into some sort of technical school or training or coordinating services where they're doing something other than just getting a job or not getting a job or sitting at home. So we work with vocational rehabilitation and then vocational rehabilitation contracts with Missouri University through the Pre-Employment Transition Specialist Program. And even with COVID happening, we have our pre-ETS person coming into district a few times a year where they work on those type of things. We have coming up for our IEP students, they call it like a job shadowing month in February, where our juniors and seniors can participate in a job shadowing experience. We also have coming up several of our students, and although they have in the past, our juniors getting ready to be seniors have the opportunity to participate in the Missouri Youth Summer Work Program, where they have a job coach or a peer coach who partner with some of the businesses that are in town. Or I look at Willow Springs High School or Willow Springs School District has been the work site place, and they either have a person from vocational rehabilitation or a school personnel that provides that job coaching for them to help with employability skills. Part of that training is they work on interview skills, they work on resume writing. At the end of that experience, it is a paid experience as well. I think they get close to 100 hours of paid experience for doing that. So we're working on some of those things as well to help improve that. We want to see all of our kids, and that's the goal of vocational rehabilitation, is they want everyone to be employable when they graduate high school. And the next slide. And this is kind of shifting away from the packet. The rest of that part of the district profile just explains in detail the data tables. Where we're at with special ed this year, I wanted to talk to you a little bit what we've been doing so far. Currently, we've had 28 initial referrals for special ed. 23 of those 28 we have tested, and 16 out of those 23 have qualified for special ed services. Out of those, 11 were parent referrals, and the others were from our district staff who have noticed concerns in the classroom. The next slide.
Hold on, I've got a question on that one.
Sure.
If we've had 28 referrals so far this year, how come they're not all done? Why have we only done 23?
Well, whenever we have a referral, there is a 90-day process for evaluation. Once we receive the referral, whether it be from a parent or whether it be from a classroom teacher, we have 30 days to meet with the parent. And all of these don't happen at the same time. They're kind of scattered.
Okay.
At the date that I had made this report, that's where we were at.
Okay.
And then within 30 days of receiving that referral, we're required to meet with the parent and take a look at whether we suspect a disability or not based on the data we have. And then we have to obtain consent within those 30 days if we plan to test. After we have consent to do the evaluation, then there is a 60-day window that we have to have all the testing completed and meet with the parent again to determine eligibility for the child.
Okay. All right.
So, hey, Marlena, do you expect then that the remaining 5 of those will be completed before this year is over?
Yes, they will be. We already
And,
have consent on them.
and you may not have this data because this is your first year, but the 28 initial referrals, do you know how that might compare to prior years?
I could look at Mr. Williams' slideshow from last year and give you a little better data and make a comparison. I don't have the figures other than I had his presentation from last year.
No, that's fine.
Okay. All right, the next slide. To date, and I noticed I had a typing mistake on this slide when I was reviewing it, we've had 35 transfer students. Some of those have been from in-state and out-of-state. Whenever we have an out-of-state transfer, what's unique about that is they have to meet the Missouri initial eligibility criteria to qualify for services in the state of Missouri. So what typically happens if we have a student, for example, who is transferred from Nebraska, Nebraska has different eligibility criteria than the state of Missouri. So what we do is provide what's considered comparable services to what that child was receiving at the district that they came from, while we are conducting our own evaluation to determine if they meet Missouri eligibility. So we've had a few of those that we're working through. We have, of those 35, we've had 9 of them were high school students, 9 were middle school students, 13 elementary students, and 4 were early childhood special ed students. And then what I wanted to note is that 42 students transferred out of district this year. And even though that number seems pretty high, that is still down from where we were at last year. There were 54 that had transferred out last year. So just somewhere as a comparison.
How many transferred in last year?
I would have to go back and look at that data too. I don't remember off the top of my head. I think that we may be up a little bit from where we were at last year. But I could get that to you.
So we're actually net down?
We're down a little bit from where we were at last year. Some of that also, we had some of our students, when I talk about transfer out, some of our students have chosen the homeschool route, and a couple of them were medically fragile students, and the parents had just decided at this point, I know that we've had an early childhood student, and then we had another student that I believe may be in middle school that is medically fragile, and the parent chose for them not to receive distance learning special ed services that they were going to elect to homeschool for this school year because of COVID. So we have had a little bit of that as well.
Hey, Marlene, a quick question. Are those students who, if they make the determination to homeschool, do we still provide special services to those kids?
If they are homeschooling, what happens is every fall we have what's called a proportionate share meeting, and our district meets as a team. We put out a notice and said we're having our meeting on this date. And on that date, any parent of a homeschool child, any stakeholders who may be a part of that, we meet and determine what our proportionate share funds need to be spent on for the year. Our funds for the year are based off of the numbers of homeschool students we had the previous year that were reported. This year we had about $1,200 in our proportionate share fund, and so that team has to meet and decide what those funds will be spent on to provide services to our homeschool students. When we met this year, we decided our funds would be spent on speech services. So any service that would be provided to our homeschool students would be related around the speech area for this year, because that's what the team had decided. Okay, I'm ready for the next slide. All right, this is just a graph of the special ed students per grade level of where we're at right now. I know that there's a little bar that's covering up the some of the data on my end over here, but our early childhood students, currently we have 16 that are in our early childhood program, and that's 3 to kindergarten age. Some of those are speech-only students. Kindergarten, we currently have 15 students. First, we have 19. Second, we have 18. Third, we have 13. Fourth, we have 18 students. Fifth grade, we have 12. Sixth, we have 16. Seventh, 14. 8th grade, 18 students. 9th grade, we have 20 students. And 10th, 15 students. 11th grade, 10. And 12th, 11th. All right, the next slide. And I have reported about this previously at a meeting, but I put it in a chart form for you. This is over the past 3 years, our incident rate for Willow Springs School District compared to what the state average is. And our district is currently at 17.46% incident rate. The state average is 13.66. So we are over on identifying students with special ed, and we have been consistently, if you'll look over the past 3 years. We've been over the state average for several years. The next slide. I've also made a comparison of our districts that are closest to us on where they were at on their incident rates, just so you can kind of see in comparison where Willow Springs is compared to some of the others. At Mountain Grove, they're pretty close to being on their incident rate. West Plains School District is pretty close to being on target. The Mountain Grove District is a little bit above on where they should be. Kabul is quite a bit above where they should be on their incident rates. So we aren't the only district around with that problem. There are some that are closer to where they should be than what we currently are. All right, the next slide. This is a breakdown of the disability areas and how many students we have in each one of those areas. Our early childhood students are the first column, and this is over the past 2 years. So our students in the area of intellectual disability haven't changed. Our emotional disturbance, we are down 1. We did have a student transfer in district that has an orthopedic impairment. Hearing impairment, we only have 2 now. Specific learning disability, we have 64, which is our highest area. Other health impairment, we have 48. And autism, we currently have 18. Young child developmental delay. This only reports up to 5-year-olds, so there are only 6 of those currently, but overall we have 16 students in our early childhood program. Language impairment has went up, and that is because I feel like that our criteria changed about 3 years ago. So So our number of language impairment students has increased. Speech impairment, that criteria changed also 3 years ago, and that number has went down because of the criteria change. But altogether, with that is how we come up with our 17% incident rate when we add those all together. All right, that's all of the slideshow, but I do have some more pages in your packet that I wanted to talk to you a little bit about. And then I tried to label them by page number. If you're looking at what I'm looking at, the top page will say Missouri Office of Special Ed, and it'll say compliance standards and indicators, and then eligibility criteria for intellectual disability. And what I wanted to share with the board is what I look at and what the special ed team looks at when we're determining eligibility for our students. And I have given you 3 examples out of the different eligibility areas. So you will know what we look at whenever we're making these determinations. The first one is on intellectual disability. And if you look at the column that's on the left, it'll talk about the legal requirement. And the first thing for intellectual
Hey,
disability.
Marlena, can you tell us what page you're on?
It will say, I don't have your board packet, but, or if you can even see what I'm looking at here, if I did it close enough.
What's the
look
top
at
of it
this.
say? Eligibility
It's Missouri
criteria?
Office is good. That one,
Missouri office.
That's
Right
page
here.
1.
At the bottom?
SP1,
That's right one.
the SP1.
Gotcha.
Okay. Now are we all together?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so what I was talking about is on the left side of the page, it talks about the legal requirements. And these examples that I've given you come from our compliance manual. There is one of these for every every area of eligibility for special ed. And this is what our special ed team looks at when we're making eligibility determinations. I've given you 3 different examples out of the 14 different areas, and these are the most common ones that students can qualify for services in. And I want to share a little bit with you about taking a look at what we look at. So on intellectual disability, and this is probably the most cut and dry area that a student can qualify in. On the legal requirement, it says that a student has to perform 2 standard deviations below their peers. And how that is as determined is, what we do as a district is we administer an IQ test to the student. That IQ test, the student has to score 2 standard deviations below the mean, or in lay terms, basically that would mean that a student had to score a 70 or below on that IQ test. Average IQ is about 90 to 110. So a student would have to have an IQ that is a 70 or below. And it is cut and dry. It's not a 71, it's not a 73, it has to be that 70 number or below on a cognitive assessment. The next area on the legal requirement is that they have to have an adaptive behavior score that is consistent with their cognitive ability. So what we do to determine that is we give a rating scale to a classroom teacher, sometimes it's a parent, and they answer questions about the student's skills. Are they able to take care of their personal needs? Are they able to restroom? Are they able to dress themselves? And that score on that assessment has to be similar to what their IQ is. So it needs to be in the range of the 70 or close to it. And then finally, on the legal requirement for that, they have to have a reduced cognitive ability and adaptive behavior, and that has to adversely affect their educational performance. So what we do to determine that, first of all, we look at grades, we look at an academic assessment, we test their academic skills to see if they are performing much below where they should be academically. And if so, then that student would meet eligibility for a student with an intellectual disability. Intellectual disability, that term had changed over the past few years. That used to be the old mental retardation category, and they've kind of prettied up the name to be less abrasive. So that's that area. On the next page, the SP2, this is the criteria for other health impairment. Other health impairment criteria really was fine-tuned about 3 years ago. The state's expectations of what was required for us to determine a student eligible in this category And that is largely because it kind of become a dumping ground over the years of, hey, take your kid to the doctor, get this medical ADHD, and then we can write them an IEP. And the state largely recognized that that is what occurred. And so what was expected from districts really changed on what they were wanting from us to make that eligibility. So they changed their criteria. The last revision of that was in 2019. So on the legal requirement, it requires a health evaluation. And that indicator states that the evaluation report documents a comprehensive health evaluation by a licensed physician that results in a diagnosis of a chronic or acute health problem, or for those conditions not requiring a medical diagnosis, such as attention deficit disorder. The evaluation report documents a comprehensive evaluation by one of those personnel, psychologist, professional counselor, and the documentation indicates that the health impairment results in limited strength, vitality, or alertness, including heightened alertness. So what we have to have as a district is a report from a physician or one of those people. It cannot be from a nurse practitioner. It has to be from someone that they have on their list here that says that the student has this diagnosis and this is how they come up with it. We have to have some sort of proof. It can't be written on a script pad saying so-and-so has ADHD, give him an IEP. We have to have that comprehensive evaluation from a medical professional that indicates this information that they have stated here. And then the last legal requirement of that is that we have to have a comprehensive educational evaluation. And so that's when we as a district do further assessment for the child to determine if that health condition affects them in the classroom. The next few pages, I have provided some samples of school reports on students that we have tested, just so you know what that might look like for a student. The SP3 page, this is an example of a score report from an academic achievement test. And if you'll see this first page, it has where it says subtest score summary, and it has all of the different areas that a student is given tests in when we do an academic achievement test. On an academic achievement test, average is 85 to 115. We use standard scores, so it's that second column, to decide whether or not a student would meet criteria or not. However, subtest scores are not used to determine eligibility. That is just all the areas we test in. The next page, the SP4 page, is the composite score summary report of an average of all of those subtests. So if you'll take a look at those, the areas are oral language, and this child scored a 90, total reading, an 84, basic reading was an 88, reading comprehension and fluency was an 83, written expression was an 83, mathematics was an 81, and math fluency was a 71 with an overall total achievement of an 82. So this child, when we evaluated them, they had some areas that were in the average range and some areas that were in the below average range. But what we also do is do an IQ test on a child. And this is the same child that we did the academic achievement test on. So I'm on the SP5 page now. And when we do an IQ test, there are 10 areas that are assessed. And out of those 10, 8 of them are used to determine a child's full scale IQ. The first area that's assessed is verbal comprehension. A child's verbal comprehension is a really good indicator of how they should learn in the classroom. They should be able to hear information orally and learn that way. And I know I had talked about this on the previous one. Average IQ is about 90 to 110. So this child's verbal comprehension was right below the average range. The next area is in visual spatial, and this assesses a child's ability to learn with hands-on type of skills. And this child scored at an 89 in that area. The next area is fluid reasoning. Your fluid reasoning skills are your comprehension type of skills, or being able to answer like open-ended kind of questions, or being able to explain why something happened or occurred. This child scored an 85 in that area. The next area is working memory, and this would be the ability to recall information short term. This child scored an 82 in that area. And then the last area is processing speed, and this would be how quickly you would respond to a directive or a direction, or how long it took you to think something over before you actually acted upon it. And this child scored a 75 in that area. Overall full scale IQ of a 76, which is below average. So what we would do, first of all, I want to point out something. Usually students who have ADHD or ADD, they typically have a lower working memory and processing speed than their other areas, because cognitively being inattentive or off task or unable to focus typically affects your ability to recall information and how quickly you respond to something. So when we're determining eligibility and looking at all of the data that we have on a kid, we look at those two areas first of all to say, hey, you know what, this kid really may be affected by the ADHD because they have a lower working memory and a lower processing speed. But whenever we're determining whether this student would qualify for services, what we would do is look at the full scale IQ of a 76. Typically what you see is a student functions academically close to what their IQ is. So this student had an IQ of a 76, so when I flip back to the page before, that SP4 page again, what I should see is that this child's composite scores academically, if their educational performance is affected by ADHD, I should see that their academic scores should be much lower than their IQ. They should not be functioning, they're academically, I'm sorry, I got all tongue-tied here, academically they should be scoring lower than what their cognitive ability is. And what you see in this case, the child had a full-scale IQ of a 76, but with the exception of math fluency, the child scored academically above what the cognitive ability is. So we couldn't say as a district that this child's ADHD adversely affected their educational performance, because they're performing above what their ability level is cognitively. So this student would not have met eligibility for special ed services. All right, any questions about that one? That was a lot, I know. Okay, I'm going to flip over to the SP6 page now. The last area is on specific learning disabilities. The legal requirements for that, if you look in the areas of inadequate achievement box, these are the areas that a student can qualify for special ed services as a student with a learning disability. Basic reading skills, reading comprehension, reading fluency, written expression, math calculation, math problem solving, listening comprehension, and oral expression. I put an X through RTI method because our district uses the discrepancy method, which is on the next page, the top of SP7. So determine eligibility as a student with a learning disability. What we use is called the discrepancy method for our district, and how that is determined in a nutshell is we take a student's full scale IQ, we do a cognitive assessment, the IQ test, and we do an academic achievement test. The discrepancy, according to our chart, is 1.5 standard deviations below the mean. And basically what that means is we take 22 points. If you graph this out on a bell curve, you would see where that 22 points would come from, the 1.5 standard deviations. So we take a student's full scale IQ, subtract 22 points, and any area academically that child would be scoring at that 22 point mark or below would mean a student would have a learning disability in that area. I've provided an example of what that would look like for a kiddo as well. If you want to flip through, and I just summed up SP7, SP8 for you. So I'm on SP9 now. This is a child that we assessed, and same cognitive assessment that I explained on the last one. We assessed all of those areas. Overall, the child has the full scale IQ of a 102. So we take that 102, subtract the 22 points, which would give us what we call a criterion score of an 80. So then I look at the academic achievement test that is provided. The subtests are on SP10, the composite scores are on SP11. So I look at all of those areas, and I look for any score that is an 80 or below, because that's my criterion score. I look at oral language, and it was an 87. So this child didn't meet eligibility in that area. Total reading wasn't one of those areas that was on my legal requirements chart. Even though that score is a 68, there's not an area you can qualify for total reading. Basic reading was a 72, so that's below the 80 mark. Reading comprehension and fluency was a 66, so that is below my 80 mark. Written expression is a 79, so that's below the mark. Mathematics was an 81. It is not below the 80, even though it's just 1 point. It's not below the mark, so they wouldn't qualify in that area. Math fluency was a 79, which is below the 80 mark. So overall, the student qualified for special ed services for a student with a learning disability in the areas of basic reading, reading comprehension fluency, written expression, and math fluency.
Marlena?
Yes, sir.
So based on that then, and so this particular student qualifies for special education services, correct?
Yes,
But
that's
so,
correct.
but when we write the individual education plan, it's going to be specific to those areas that he or she is low in, correct?
That is correct. Does anyone have questions about any of that? I didn't know if it would be helpful for you all to see what, I know that kind of some requirements that Mr. Hall has had of me, largely because of our incident rate and we're over state average, and he's asked specific things of me, is that we really take a look at our students and their eligibility and make sure that we're following the criteria to appropriately identify students with disabilities. And sometimes that's not always a pleasant decision or pleasant conversations, and it may not make everybody happy. And so I think that sometimes when they contact you as school board members, to hear, that they're unhappy about decisions that were made. But I thought it might be helpful for you to know what we look at on our end. And there's one of these legal requirements for every one of the 14 areas that students can qualify for. We just follow the checklist according to what the criteria is. Is it this? Is it this? Is it this? And that's how we determine our eligibility.
Question, whenever they changed the way that you can identify other health impaired,
Yes.
Is that going to change our numbers much, you think?
I think that it has in some aspects, but, and that is only because, first of all, our data has to be current. The medical medical information has to be current. So I know that what I've encountered already this year has been, say I have a student who was identified as a kindergartner with other health impairment. They had an ADHD diagnosis when they were in kindergarten, and then nothing was followed up with that. The parent hadn't taken the child back to the doctor. They haven't had any sort of treatment, follow-up care. And I'm not saying that the child has to be medicated or anything along those lines, because we don't require parents to do anything of that sort. However, they do have to be under the care of a physician within the evaluation cycle, which is every 3 years. And what I have found is that the kid had the initial diagnosis in kindergarten, and now they are a 9th grader, and I'm just giving an example, and nothing has been done since kindergarten. So we don't have evidence, as the state would call it, to prove that the kid still had a medical condition. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it did. I just remember that being a problem with parents taking kids to the doctor and getting them diagnosed.
Most gen- yeah, and I think kind of what the state feels is that students are with ADHD, unless we have the data that shows that when we've done the IQ test, we've done the academic test, that they do have lower academic achievement scores. And sometimes students with ADHD do qualify as students with disabilities because their academic scores are lower than their cognitive ability, but not low enough to be considered a student with a learning disability. It's not that 22-point difference, but it is lower. So we do place them as students with disabilities with IEPs, and that does still happen. But I feel like kind of what the state feels like we should be leaning towards is these students, for example, the one that I give you an example of should probably have a 504 plan versus an IEP. And a 504 plan is written for students who don't qualify for special ed services but have a health problem that affects a major life function, and learning and thinking and all of those kind of things affects a major life function. So I would write a 504 plan that would allow them to have accommodations in the classroom, but not necessarily need pulled out to a special ed classroom for individualized instruction. They just would receive accommodations in the regular classroom. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Oh.
No? All right, thank you.
All right.
Please don't do a pop test and all that next month.
No chance, no chance.
All right. There we are. Chris, go over a district assessment plan.
Yes, our district assessment plan is our plan for testing. It goes over it outlines all of our procedures for assessment, anything from hearing tests that we do on campus to the MAP test or the ACT. And this comes up to the board for review, or for approval every year in February or March. And this year, I'm bringing it up in February, but our plan didn't change very much from last year. Oh, good, you have it up on the screen, because I know it went to you digitally in your packet, or in your digital packet. But Mr. Hall, will you go to page 36? And I want to show you the biggest plan. We are still required to test 95% of our student population, whether they are receiving instruction in seated classrooms or in virtual classrooms. And so this year we added to the plan to include how we are going to test our virtual and distance learners. Right now we're just kind of in the infancy stages of preparing for that for this year. So there may be some, I allowed for a lot of ambiguity in our testing procedure this year with our, go up just a little bit if you're, for our virtual distance learners. But the reason that we need to still test these students is we are required by federal law to test 95% of our student population in their eligible areas. And so we came up with different procedures. For example, starting next week, I'm going to send letters out to those families and let them know that they are going to be tested in the month of April, and then we'll let them know as time, probably right after spring break. Give them a little bit more specifics on where they are testing, and that kind of goes along with number 3 in that procedure. The district test coordinator may arrange for assessments to be administered in a public location off campus, such as a civic or community or civic-owned building, if space is not available on campus. And that is something that we are having a little trouble with anything extra that goes on campus. If we're doing it during the school day, like for example, if we want to do professional development, we want to test kids. If we're wanting to test, say, 10 kids at the same time, there's no place on campus really to test them and maintain, for this year at least, maintain social distance. So right now what I'm looking at is testing in the Ferguson building. I've made arrangements for that. The only thing that can keep us from testing in that location would be if our machines, our Chromebooks, it's not compatible with the city's Wi-Fi, and we're going to, after Andrew gets all the Chromebooks set up that we're talking about in administrators' reports, he's going to get our testing server built and then we're going to take those over to take a couple devices over to the Ferguson building, and we're going to test the devices out to make sure that everything works okay. And so we do that every year anyway on campus, just to make sure that the version of the software that we have works with what we works with our firewall and that sort of thing as well. So this isn't something that's new procedure-wise as far as testing our technology. So that is where we're at right now as far as testing that group of students. I'm going to be administering that myself, which means I'm going to spend a lot of time off campus giving tests to about 40 students who are still receiving virtual instruction either through Launch or a MOCAP course or through our distance learning program through Edmentum. So it will be quite the task because there are a number of grade levels, there are a number of EOCs on the high school level that are involved, but I'm trying to keep that to where we don't have to pull people off of campus and get subs in order to administer this as well. So I'm going to rely heavily on the building principals, on the counselors, and Andrew to help with support on those days that I'm off campus, and I'm estimating that I'm going to be off campus about 7 days to administer tests to our off-campus learners. I think Mr. Hall just passed around a calendar with the testing dates, and so
Coach Colley.
Oh, yes.
Yes, I got it.
Hey, yeah, I texted that to you just now, so.
Okay.
I got it.
Okay.
And I forgot to email him on that. Email the calendar to him. So anyway, this is subject to change, but I think for the most part we have the testing dates nailed down, and for each building for the map and the EOC. If you'll notice an orange box in the top right-hand corner, we are continuously giving different portions of the MAP-A test. We've given what are called testlets throughout the course of the school year, and Ms. Marker's overseeing that. Our English language learners are in the process right now of taking the access test, which is for English proficiency and measuring that, and students score high enough on that, that will determine whether or not they continue on receiving services or we graduate them out of the program. Then we're also administering the ACT and for our college-bound students, and for those who are not maybe bound for the workforce, giving them the ACT work keys. We're planning on doing that March 30th and 31st, and everything on those two tests this year will be online. So we did that last year; it was pretty successful, and we're going to continue on with that as well. And so that'll be given to all of our juniors this year. Outside of that, I think everything's the same, pretty much the same from last year. Are there any questions that you have about our testing procedures?
I just got a question.
Yes.
That you mentioned there, the ACT work keys.
Yes.
What is that?
That measures more career readiness than college readiness, and actually students who score high enough on it will receive a certificate at different levels. They have platinum, gold, silver, and bronze levels, and they can actually take that certificate, attach it to a resume, and there are businesses, more so in West Plains than anywhere else in Howell County, that do recognize that as a certificate of proficiency in employment. So.
Any questions over that? All right, thank you. Summer school proposal. What do we got going there?
Okay, I have, in your packet is a copy of the summer school proposal, and if I can get to it. Okay, I have, and both Dr. Spence and Mr. Cottengam will speak to their portion of the summer school proposal. Let me go ahead and pull this up. I think I have Dr. Spence's first, I believe. Is it not in here? Okay, just go ahead and refer
Yeah,
to
mine's
what's in
pretty
your board, what's in
straightforward.
your packet. I don't have it on the screen.
In high school, it's primarily credit recovery. Normally, we have 2 teachers. Actually, in the proposal, it has 2 teachers. We may need to up that to 4 teachers because of the amount of students that we'll have that need that credit recovery during the summer. That we're going to emphasize that as we can't physically force them to come to summer school, but there's a lot of students that really need that this year. So we should have a big crowd for summer school, and it will strictly be credit recovery. Although Mrs. Barker has not volunteered, but offered to do driver's ed for us this summer. So we may be bringing back physical driver's ed. We did that on launch for a couple of years, but I think the physical driver's ed would be nice to offer. So we may be bringing that back to summer school. 2 sessions in June.
So how does that work, Marty? One teacher and they're doing all this credit recovery for all those classes. What
Yeah.
are they doing this via launch? Or
Yeah,
what is-
Edmonton.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Teachers just, they're kind of.
They're the
credit
proctor
control.
and make sure that the students actually,
Okay.
getting what they need to get out of it.
Okay.
We will have some students who are going to be doing some sort of credit acquisition, possibly through launch this year.
Yeah, if our high flyers that want to get ahead and want to take an extra class, we can definitely take care of them as well.
Okay, all right.
But primarily it'll be credit recovery.
Gotcha.
Okay, Mr. C, did you want to speak to the K-8 summer school program?
Yeah, the dates are June 1st through the 24th, 18 days, and we'll provide core classes for K through 8th grade and intervention for those students that need intervention. We tentatively plan on going back to the pool this year. I know the city has said it will be ready and open by Memorial Day weekend, I believe. So that's our plans as of now, but as we all know, plans can change between now and then, so. But you'll see a timeline there that, if the board approves this proposal, we'll give the dates out to teachers and so they can plan as well if they want to work or not. Then we'll recruit some drivers and teachers probably in mid-March, and then have kids sign up in April. So hopefully it'll be a little back to normal this year. July was kind of different, but it went well last year. But I think, to drive numbers up, the pool was a big force behind that.
Very good. Any questions on summer school? All right, school calendar?
Okay, sure, it's here. Let's see. Okay, if you look in your packets, and then I also have it on the screen as well, this is the proposed school calendar for 2021-22. Very, very similar to the current calendar that we have right now. If you recall, year before last, the state changed the statute when it comes to the first official start day. And beginning with that change in statute, you cannot start school any sooner than 14 days prior to the first Monday in September. And that places our start day at August 23rd, and that's the earliest that we can start school next year. With that in mind, as I said, as you go down through the calendar, it's very, very similar. The problem that posed for us by pushing that start date back is it really has a tendency to imbalance the 2 semesters. And you might say on the surface, well, why is that such a big deal? Well, elementary and possibly middle school, not that much. High school, kind of a bigger deal. Because a high school they award credit based on semester credit. Many of the classes are semester courses. So one kid may take a class in first semester, and another kid may take the same class in the second semester, and you're going to be losing 2 weeks of instruction in the second semester. So in effect, it's really not the same class, so it makes it difficult. But we have to do what we can to balance them up as much as we can, all right? And still get our hours in. Now, by statute, we're required to have 1,044 hours. They changed it from days a couple years ago. So now the only deciding factor is at the end of the day, When you finish for the school year, you have to have a minimum of 1,044 instructional hours. The size of our day is 6.55 hours. We increased that last year. We added 15 minutes to the day, which brought the actual fractional part of our day up to from 6.25 to 6.55. So that's how long each day is. And if we have two early dismissals in there, those are 4.3 hours long. And so we add up all those days and those early dismissals, it has to come up with at least 1,044 hours. The only change in this one, we surveyed the staff, because it's a big deal for the staff in terms of the two biggest breaks in our system. I said two of the three: Thanksgiving break, Christmas break, and spring break. And typically, spring break is a week long unless we have to use those for snow makeup days, all right? Typically, we try not to do that, but those are there in that case. We surveyed the staff as far as the days are concerned. We could either have 3 days of Thanksgiving and a full 2 weeks of Christmas, or a full week of Thanksgiving and then go until like the 22nd of December and have like a week and a half for Christmas. So we surveyed the staff on what their preference would have been, and it came out to about 70%, over 70% really wanted to have the 2 weeks of Christmas, which didn't matter administratively to us. I mean, whether you take two and have them go 2 less days and they at Christmas, or 2 more days of Thanksgiving, didn't really matter. It's still broad as it is long. And it didn't change the size of the semesters. So we went ahead and put that in there based on that survey. And the rest of it, as I said, is pretty straightforward. You still have Martin Luther King Jr. Day off. You still have President's Day off. We have an in-service day on November 1st. We have an in-service day on February 18th. We have an in-service day on April 18th. Our last day of school is scheduled for May 18th. So like I said, it's very, very familiar and very similar to the one that we have right now. And so with this, we have 6.92 days built into the calendar for snow days, meaning that if you have a bad weather day, you don't necessarily have to make up right away. Those 6.92 days ends up being 1,089 hours. So we're like 45 hours over what we need. Well, those 45 hours are buffer. That's what gets us through the year in case we have a bad weather day. And so that's kind of, I mean, this year, just to let you know how similar it is, this year our calendar was 1,089.35 days, or hours, I mean. So it's almost identical with the exception of the amount of time for Christmas break versus Thanksgiving break. And the process on this is I worked with the administrative team to develop this. We did survey the staff on that one question. I shared it with the superintendent's council, which consists of teachers representing all 3 buildings, and then we emailed it to the staff at large just if there was any input from anyone. There wasn't any input from the staff at large, so essentially I'm presenting this to you for approval for next year. And is there any questions at all?
I don't understand, and I don't have any questions at all. Just clarify how the built-in snow days work. I mean, you build a longer year, and then if you need that time, you take it up.
Correct.
Does that time fall off if you don't need that time?
No. And that's a good question. We've had that question before. It's like, well, we had a really mild winter, so, we have 1,089.35. We only used like a day, so we still have 1,082 some odd hours. Does that mean we can stop school early? And the answer to that is no, because we're here for the best interest of kids. The calendar's been scheduled, and so we're going to continue to provide, our purpose is to provide education to kids. So if we go over and above, that's okay. We just can't go under, but if we end up teaching another 30 or 40 hours and we have, 3 or 4 extra days that we really need it, that's okay. We hope that the kids will benefit from that.
Right.
So
on the other side of that, if we go over, we can extend though.
If we
we use up our days, we can continue.
Exactly. And that's a good question, because right now, I mean, it's very similar this year. The last day of school is the 18th of May. By minimum, we have to have 1,044 hours. And the state will basically require that. And they could come back the next year if you didn't get your hours in, and they could actually cut your funding accordingly because you didn't get all your days in. So the way we do is that we just extend a day or 2 just to get there. Okay. So if we ended up having to use, 8 snow days, 9 snow days, then we would just pick up a couple extra days at the end of the year. Or we have some other days in here that we designate. For instance, January 17th, Martin Luther King Jr. Day is a makeup day. Well, that's kind of silly because you're in the dead of winter, So, and typically you probably wouldn't have used all your days by then anyway. President's Day is another one, and then the first 3 days in spring, we could use those as well. But I would like to think that if we're just a few hours away, it might be less intrusive if we just add a couple days to the end of the year rather than take away anybody's spring break.
Sure.
So
you actually have 60 hours more in the second semester than you do the first semester.
yeah, if you look at, when you look at total days, we have And that's probably correct. I mean, when we look at total days,
88.
we had 79 in the first semester of 88, so that's 9 times 6.55. So yeah, basically you got about 60 hours more in the second semester than you do the first. How do you solve that problem when they push this back so far? The way to solve it is not a very educationally effective way to do it. And that is to extend the first semester into January. Right, so what are you gonna, how do you do that? So we have Dr. Spence over there, he has finals, right? And so we're gonna expect kids to go home over Christmas and study for all their finals that they're gonna be given when they get back to school in January. It's just not very effective. So between that option and having imbalanced semesters, you're better off just having imbalanced semesters. So, I mean, that's kind of what they caused when they passed that statute, so.
How do you come up with May 6th as graduation, and I'm assuming that's the last day of the seniors?
I just
How do we?
I just use the corresponding dates.
I understand, how come they don't have to be in school the same amount of days as the rest of them?
And the statute allows seniors to attend less because of the fact that they do get it out and they do graduate like a week before. And the same is also true for kindergarten.
What
kids.
statute?
Well, there's a compulsory attendance statute.
Okay.
That actually spells out seniors because they typically get out earlier than everybody else.
Right.
Because they graduate like a week before everybody else does. So there's a smaller requirement for seniors, there's a smaller requirement for kindergarten kids because they only go half a day. All right, but everyone else is required, but they also have to get their 1,044 in.
Does that get the seniors their 1,044?
I think they'll stay in there, yeah.
Okay, all right.
Because if we don't, we'll have to extend theirs too.
That makes sense.
Accordingly, yeah. Yeah, if we end up with the number of snow days, then we may have to extend how long the seniors go. I mean, I don't know how that works because we have graduation and have them come back to school the next Monday. I'm not sure that's going to work.
Graduation day, yeah.
That's on Marty.
Yeah, I kind of think that ain't gonna happen, so, yeah. Any questions on this at all? You good? All right.
Any comments from our guests tonight? Scott? No? All right.
Writing down acronyms.
Oh my.
You'll get a sheet.
Yeah, well, that's another meeting, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. We'll move on to items for action. The first one is the district assessment plan. A motion is in order to approve the district assessment plan as presented.
So moved.
By Mac, and a second.
Second.
By Dean. Any discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Very good. Motion will be in order to approve the dates and times for summer school as presented.
So moved.
By Mac, and a second.
Second.
Adam, any discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, school calendar. The motion is ordered to approve the proposed 21-22 school calendar as presented.
So moved.
Adam, and a second.
Second.
Matt, any discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
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 Opposed? And a contract with Thomas and Douglas. A motion will be in order to approve Kenny Thomas and Company for auditor for fiscal year '22.
I don't know if you need any discussion on that, but that's the same auditing firm we've used probably for 5-6 years now. We're just comfortable with them. They seem to work well with both Mandy and Jamie for the most part. But no, I think it's just the fact that they know our system. And this year, they had to learn the fact that we moved from Chockable to Software Unlimited. So they've gotten up to speed on that. And by and large, it's a good process.
So moved.
Dean, and a second.
Second.
Matt? Any more discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
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 Opposed? It's all for open session tonight, all I've got. Receive a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
By Matt, and a second.
Second.
By Adam. Do that by roll call.
Aye.
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 And aye. Very good.
Okay, and Marlena and Tina and Bobby, you can go ahead and sign off. Have a great evening.
See ya.
Thank you.
Carried.
I don't know if you guys noticed the tongue in grease.
Open. You got anything else tonight, no, Bill? Anybody else? Receive a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
A Dean and a second.
Second.
Matt, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Stay.
Very good.
Thanks, Coach.